permission. So,
Okay.
Hi, all, everybody. Steve Cady here at Bowling Green State University. And with the Think Tank series, the All Things Change, Nexus for Change, and all kinds of things that have to do with change and human-centered approaches to change. One of the things I'll say at Bowling Green is we have some of our doctoral students here. I'm really honored to be a part of a university and a program that has a doctorate in organization development and change. And we have professionals from all over the world in this program. Lisa has been one of the people to work with our students and help them publish articles and stuff that went in a special issue. So thank you, Lisa, for that. The students still talk about that. We have some students from our master's program also here as well. And we have guests from all over the world and partners and friends and so forth. So today we have a wonderful conversation that we're going to have with David Bright, who is the former chair of the division for OD&C at the Academy of Management. So David, thank you for bringing both Kim and Bob together here today. I'm so excited for the topic and to hear about Kim and Bob's latest thinking. So I'm going to turn it over to you, David, and take us away on a fun conversation for the next 90 minutes.
All right. Thank you. Well, I'm also very excited to be here today. I guess I'm kind of a guest and will be the guest
Host. The guest
for
host, the guest
guest
host with the most.
host. Right. So we have guests of guests here. Um, I am very honored, first of all, to be part of this Think Tank series. This is uh, a conversation or a series of conversations that Steve and I have been talking about for several years now, and I'm excited by what this series has explored, and so I'm hopeful that today's conversation can contribute to the thoughts that have been emerging over the last several months in this series. Today we have a chance to hear from the perspectives of two of my favorite people in the world. Both have been my mentors and dear friends for many years. And so I'm excited to introduce to you first Dr. Kim Cameron. Uh, and I'll provide the formal bio here. He's the William Russell Kelly Professor Emeritus of Management and Organizations at the Ross School of Business. And he, along with Bob and with Jane Dutton, is one of the co-founders of the Center for Positive Organizations at the University of Michigan. Renowned for his research on organizational virtuousness and positive leadership, he's published over 140 academic articles and has at least 15 scholarly books to his credit. Been a very prolific researcher and author. Previously served as the dean of the Weatherhead School at Case Western Reserve and as an associate dean in the Marriott School at Brigham Young University. But the majority of his career, I believe, has been at the University of Michigan. And he has been recognized among the top 10 in organizational studies, top 10 scholars in organization studies for frequent downloads from Google. Bob Quinn is the Marriott Elliott Tracy Collegiate Professor Emeritus at the University of Michigan. And he has also had a very prolific career studying purpose, leadership, culture, and change. He's also a former chair of the Division of Organization Development and Change at the Academy of Management. In fact, I think you were the chair the year that change was added to the title of the division, if I'm remembering correctly. And he co-founded this also the Center for Business or for Positive Organizations. One of his first significant contributions to the field of OD and of management is the development of the competing values framework, and he and Kim have co-authored a number of articles and books that draw from that. He's authored, I think, 18 books at the last count. I don't know, we've lost track. And probably one of his best sellers is Deep Change, but a more recent book, The Positive Organizations, and his work ranks him among the top 1% of professors cited in organizational behavior textbooks. So he's also a fellow of both the Academy of Management and the World Business Academy. Now, if I've gotten any of those facts out of alignment, please correct me. But really a pleasure to welcome both of you. And so this for me, I actually want to use this as I guess my affiliation with both of you, if I could maybe share just a little bit. I originally met Kim when I was a student at Brigham Young University. He was one of my professors, and then it's because of him that I went to Case Western Reserve to do the PhD. I don't know if you know that, Kim, but that's why I went there. And he and I ended up working collaboratively on some of the early work on organizational virtuousness. And I've been fortunate to be able to just have him as a, a mentor, and he's helped me to get started in my academic career. And then with Bob, we've just been good friends for a while, and about 12 years ago, he invited me to help co-author a textbook on becoming a master manager, and that has led to some fun collaborations over the years as well. So I just love both of these gentlemen, and I'm grateful for the contributions they've made to my life. And I know I'm just a microcosm because you hear story after story after story of people who've been influenced by both of these wonderful uh, men. So I'm grateful to have this chance to talk with you. So our what I'd like to do is actually talk about uh, your interest in what I'm calling healthy, vibrant, flourishing organizations or human systems, uh, and we can use a different terminology if you wish. But I'm curious to know, first of all, what is the passion that has driven your work? And I'd like to start with Kim.
Well, I thank you, David, for this opportunity. I really mean that. I'm flattered that you think of me. I want to know how your kids are and how your wife is and how you're doing. I mean, you've been in leadership roles every place you've ever been, including where you are now. I don't know how in the world you do everything you're doing. Holy cow, you're a role model, David. Um, so aside from my passion to try to understand your family and how you're doing, um, excuse me, the thing that probably captures my attention most, the thing I wake up thinking about, is the impact of positive, even virtuous practices on human beings and on organizations. That is, I've become convinced that all human beings are inherently inclined toward positive and toward virtue. Let me give you an example. One of my favorite studies is a study of children ages 3 months to 8 months. Where you put a child on a caregiver's lap, they watch a puppet show for maybe 20 seconds. A puppet tries to walk across a stage, tries to climb a hill, tries to open a box. Then you have two other puppets. One puppet tries to help, support, encourage. The other puppet tries to hinder, puts a block up, you can't make it up the hill, jumps on the box, you can't open the box. Then after 20 or 30 seconds, you bring these two puppets out, put it in front of the child, and the child can select whichever puppet he or she wants to play with. About 90% of the time, the child will select the puppet that tries to help rather than tries to hinder. That is, from the time you are 3 months, long before you learn language, long before you're socialized, every human being, in fact, they do this with animals too, but every human being is inclined toward the positive. We learn our way out of that, bad is stronger than good and all those kinds of things. But if we want to change behavior, especially if we want to improve behavior, positive feedback is a lot more powerful than negative feedback. If I want to affect your emotions, negative feedback is far stronger than positive. But if I want things to change in an organization, I better rely, at least to some extent, on what's virtuous. And virtuous is, grandmother's advice. It's kindness and compassion and generosity and gratitude and humility. I mean, those kinds of things. So in the last couple of decades, I've been measuring the extent to which those behaviors are typical of organizations or of leaders in organizations. And when they're present, profitability goes up, productivity goes up, quality goes up. I mean, bottom line impact, which is hard to understand unless you believe, as I do, that human beings will respond in those circumstances. That's much more than you wanted to hear, but that's what captures my attention nowadays.
Thank you, Kim. All right, Bob, how would you answer the question? What's the passion that drives your work?
Well, my response would be very similar, but I'd probably couch it in a story. Kim and I have spent the last 20 years circling the globe, teaching positive organization scholarship all over the world, mostly to senior executives, but other people as well. Not unusual for us to spend a week going through the science of positive organizing. And the typical response is people love it. They sit on the edge of their seats. They fully engage in the conversations. They say things like, this is what I always believed, but was never able to talk about. And then on Friday, I say, okay, now what are you going to go home and do differently? And what happens is you look across the audience and it's all terrified looks. Genuine fear. They love the concepts. The concepts are embedded in science. But the notion of going back to their organization and engaging in a positive practice is terrifying. And the question is, why would that be? Why would powerful, educated people be afraid to go back and institute a positive practice? The answer is that they've all been socialized, as have all of us, in the conventional mindset, the one we learned at our mother's knee when she said, because I told you so. We began learning hierarchy very early on. We have biological responses to protect us from disturbances in life as we go into fight or flight response. Every one of those executives knows that if they go back and institute a practice, someone's going to say to them, oh, did you learn that at charm school at the university last week? And they can't think of anything more terrifying than that, because that's the beginning of death. If I get marginalized, it's not firing that most people are afraid of. It's what comes before firing, and that is being marginalized, not having voice, not having influence, becoming less and less valuable to the system. And if they depart from the norm and institute a positive practice, they are going to be punished. And so the question is, why in the world would anyone ever institute a positive practice? And that's the essence of my passion, is answering that question.
So let's build on that. Like, what are the answers that you have discovered, or that you help others to discover?
Well, quick answer is there's two paths to that change in behavior. One is crisis, and the other is purpose. It is not unusual for CEOs to discover the positive paradigm in the midst of a crisis. And then most of them forget about it, but some of them don't. And they ask the question, if we were able to function in a patterns of social excellence through crisis without leadership, is it possible to create an organization that's socially excellent through leadership without crisis? That's the question that changes everything. Most human beings are incapable of asking that question because they can't conceptualize it. The moment you begin to answer that question, you inevitably end up on the road to higher purpose. Transcending ego, pursuing higher purpose, inviting other people to pursue higher purpose. And that simply doesn't happen in most organizations most of the time. And so that's my short answer to that question.
I can't tell you the number of people that I know, or that I'm not necessarily know, but have encountered, that when Bob and I teach together, we teach a course on positive leadership. Just an innumerable number of folks will come up and say, Bob Quinn changed my life. I mean, I now think about things I haven't ever thought about before. I'm a different person. He's one of those people I know who, well, I'm typical of this old statement, if you can't do it, you teach it. Well, I can teach it. Bob's one of those people who can also do it. That's the magic with Bob Quinn, is he can practice it, help other people practice it.
Oh, I appreciate those perspectives so much. You know what, we've just had a question pop up that's actually aligned with what I would like to, I was thinking I'd like to ask. So Denise just asked, can we talk about what we mean by leaders or leadership, much less positive leadership? So what would be your answer to those questions?
Let me
We'll
look
start with you.
at the question.
Yeah. Can we talk about what we mean by leadership, leader?
Yes.
Well, while Kim's looking, I'll give you a short answer. He has a lot to say on this, but my short answer is this. Leadership is not what the conventional mindset assumes it to be, which is authority, expertise, etc. In conventional dialogue, we cannot separate leadership from hierarchy. My definition of leadership is influence. When you and I do something that causes some other person to behave differently because of what we've done, we're exerting influence and we're leading. What that means is every single person is a leader all the time. It can be for bad or good or in between, but everyone's a leader. And we can all improve our leadership. Kim?
Yeah, well, I borrow this from Bob. Everybody is a leader sometime. Nobody is a leader all the time. You know, so influence, of course, is an issue that leaders are interested in. Role modeling. You know, the best leaders I know are people who, for example, like my wife, who gave up a career in show business to be the mother of 7 children. And her best performances, and they're often spectacular, are in the presence of sleepy-eyed children who say, Mom, sing that one more time. Or would you please tell that story again using those funny voices? Well, an organization view of that is getting around people who, I mean, I want to be like them. I want to achieve better because of, or more because of what I've been observing, and so on. So, and an organization. I literally just got off a Zoom call with an organization that makes automobiles wheelchair accessible. They're called Brawnability. I'd never heard of them before, but they're in the business of trying to help people who can't drive a car, people who can't get into a car, get into a car. And they are driven by his higher purpose that Bob's an expert in talking about. And it just permeates everything they do. I mean, they say we want to help anybody who can't do it for themselves. We want to help them do it. Doesn't really matter who the CEO is or who the division chief is or who's in the accounting office. We're all in this organization. We're all just completely committed. Whatever we can do, we'll do. I mean, how could you get a better leader than that? Or better leaders, than that. So that notion of purpose, I think, is crucial. And the role model, that's the virtuousness part. If I get around a person, like David Bright, I mean, I really mean this, who's this spectacular father and role model and leader of his department and so on. I'm going to be better because I'm around those kind of folks. So more specifically, a positive leader is a person who displays positive, and sometimes I would refer to those as virtuous behaviors. They express gratitude. They contribute more than they get for themselves. They are forgiving. They turn mistakes into learning opportunities. They have compassion. People who are suffering get support, get a helping hand, and so on. And that redounds to bottom line, honest to goodness, bottom line performance in organizations.
Hello? I think can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. I think I might be having some power issues. So hopefully I don't get taken offline here.
That's right. I'll be right here, Dave.
Bob, yeah, Bob, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what a positive organization entails. So Kim's kind of given us his view on positive leadership. What is a positive organization?
If you look across the models of individual high performance, excellence, etc. If you look across the models of organizational high performance from group flow through, there's just so many of them. And you begin to look at the common denominators, there's quite a number of criteria. For example, there is a shared purpose. People are willing to spontaneously do hard things for the good of the purpose, for the higher good of the company or the organization. People are fully engaged. They are doing the task at a high level. They are doing it collaboratively at a high level. The result of the collaboration is generative. They are expanding in consciousness and capacity as they interact. The result is a series of synergies. The synergies produce attraction. Resources flow to that system at a higher rate. And the list goes on. If you put that list on one side of a page, and then you go back and say, what are the fundamental assumptions of the social sciences? And if you start with economics, man or woman is a self-interested, rational actor. Resources are scarce. Conflict is natural. Hierarchies are necessary. Accountability and control are necessary. Behavior has to be incented externally through punishment and reward. And the list goes on. It's a long list. Those assumptions exist in the social sciences because we've done hundreds of thousands of studies. And what they say is people are self-interested. Resources are scarce. Relationships are transactional. So what we have is two contrasting lists. One coming out of conventional social science saying this is the way the world is. And then we have this other list saying Here's what excellence looks like. This is what a positive organization looks like. Now, if you put that on the normal curve, the assumptions from social science go right dead in the middle, and they orbit around the notion of order. And what's happening all the time, because of disturbance and self-interest, order constantly breaks down, and we get silos of self-interest in every organization. CEOs pull their hair out. And there's all kinds of negative patterns that you and I live in all the time. Way over on the right side of the curve, where the curve gets very low and the cases get very few, is where we find social excellence. It's an emergent process. The complexity theorists tell us order is free in the emergent process. It's an entirely different experience. Now, the reaction of people on the street is, this is nonsense. I have a career in organizations, and my whole career tells me what they're really like, and it's consistent with the middle of the curve. They therefore reject the far right side of the curve. The question is, because obviously excellence is rare. By definition, excellence is deviance from the norm. But here's the big point. Excellence is a part of reality. It occurs in the material world. It is there scientifically subject to study. If we move our lens from what we know to the far end of that curve, we can begin to learn from excellence rather than learning from convention. If we learn from excellence, we can begin to run experiments and create cycles of experience that have moments of excellence. If we have more and more moments of excellence in our memory, we can formulate either practice theories or academic theories of how to create excellence. And now we've moved from a reactive life stance that all of us live in all the time to a proactive life stance where we're trying to do what Kim was just talking about, with ever increasing ability to do so. And so I think that's the challenge, is to help people learn from excellence. One of the things Kim and I do in the classroom with executives is we put that picture up on the wall, and then we say, describe to us an excellent conversation, an excellent marriage, an excellent team, an excellent organization. We let them do that for an hour, and they can all do it. The point we then make is, where did you get this informal theory of excellence? Someone finally answers and says, from our experience. Well, if it came from your experience, it exists in the real world. Now, can we create it consciously? And that's usually a showstopper at that moment, because there's a crack in that cosmic worldview, and they're beginning to see possibility.
Good. Thank you, Bob. I would love to hear Kim's thoughts and maybe how he could build on what you've just shared. And I know, Kim, you had a response you wanted to offer to one of the comments, but I'm also curious to know the role that positive energy plays in what Bob has just shared. And this is, I know this is an area of research that's been recent for you.
Yeah.
So what is the role of positive energy in creating the dynamic that Bob's just
Yeah,
described?
it's an important question, David. And I I put in the chat box that I wanted to
Uh-oh.
uh, comment/question, essentially saying, in Panama, in my culture, it's dominated by men. It's favors hierarchy. It's you know, culture that is tough kind of culture, and this soupy, syrupy, saccharine sweet and doesn't really fit. That's not surprising. I was in a study of an organization said, come help us. We're going to change our culture. It's an organization that's the largest organization in the world that is a university consortium. They own 69 universities throughout the world, none in the US, but lots in Central and South America, Australia, New Zealand, the Middle East, Africa, a little bit in the Far East. They essentially said, let's come and help us. We want a positive culture. They brought the 110 presidents and chancellors together. We spent 3 days with them. Part of that 3 days, we asked them to identify the positive energizers in their region of the world. Now we're talking about 12 regions of the world. And we're talking about 135,000 staff members. They identified 46 positive energizers. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. We gave as an assignment to the positive energizers. We brought those 46 together. Some of them had never been to the United States before. We said, your job is to infect the rest of the organization with positive practices and positive leadership, positive culture. And you have to do it in 90 days, 90% in 90 days. We call it a 90 and 90 challenge. We didn't give them a script. We spent 2.5 days with them, sharing what positive leadership is and giving, a whole lot of factors, a whole lot of examples, and a lot of studies to create the legitimacy, credibility, validity of what we were talking about. And then we turned them loose. I was so inspired. In 90 days, 96% of 135,000 people had been infected. Now, what does infect mean? Infect means that these people could then in turn teach to somebody else. They understood well enough what positive practices and positive culture was. They could explain it, and they'd attempted a 1% improvement themselves. 1% times 135,000 is a big improvement. Now we're talking about cultures ranging from, India and Pakistan to, Argentina and Brazil to New Zealand to Japan and Nigeria. So the culture of the country or the culture of the location didn't matter. And I believe it didn't matter because human beings are human beings. And we all have this inclination, like Bob's talking about, toward flourishing in the presence of positive. Now, one other quick study. We were invited to come over to Saudi Arabia and help them do something. Now, Saudi Arabia is a kingdom. You don't do anything without permission from the royal family. All organizations are run by members of the royal family. It's a kingdom. Well, Saudi Arabia is smart enough to know that their carbon-based economy is not going to last forever. I mean, the oil is going to run out. So in advance, they're smart enough to know we're going to change the basis of our economy from carbon-based to digitally based. We're going to have a digitally based economy. Well, to do that, I think they were very clever. They spun off one organization that had formerly been run by the kingdom, run by a member of the president's family, well, the premier's family, anyway, the royal family. And they decided to start with, it was called Saudi Telecom, the telecom business. And they said, we need to be competitive. And how do we know we're competitive? Because we're going head to head with everybody else. And we've got to have your reputation. We got to make money on our own. The royal family is not going to fund us, and so on. Long story short, the person I give a lot of credit to is named Biari. He was appointed to be the CEO of this company. And bingo, today, Saudi Telecom is the most used, has the most customers, has the highest reputation, has the biggest market share in that entire region. I mean, they've really done a great job of becoming competitive, abandoning the royal family focus, Okay, The only reason I use those two is those two, for example, there are many other examples, but those two examples for me say national culture isn't the determining factor. These practices are universal, that when we talk about these practices. And back to positive energy for a minute, I'll just 1 minute on that. Positive energy, there are lots of kinds of energy. Physical energy, which when I use it, I get exhausted. It diminishes. If I run a marathon, I can't do it again. There's emotional energy, which when I use it diminishes. I mean, if I'm really depressed, or if I go to a ball game and scream and holler and yell, emotional energy will wane. Mental energy, the same. All of us know it. We go to college and go through exam week. We're exhausted. We need a break. Or, writing an article or a report or something. Mental energy will diminish. The only kind of energy that elevates with use is called relational energy. That is, it's the energy that is exchanged between two individuals. So when I interact with David Wright, what happens to my energy? Is he elevating, life-giving, restoring, or is he exhausting, depleting, just sucks the life right out of me? In which case he's a de-energizer. So relational energy is not, you don't measure that with some MRI machine. You measure it on the basis of how people interact. And so it's a perceptual measure. There's lots of work that we've done on, well, how do you foster, enable, create positive relational energy? But that's the energy that matters the most. That is, there's a lot of empirical data that we've created and others have created as well, that when positive relational energy is high, performance is high. I'll stop.
Let me build on what Kim just said, Dave. He and I have been privileged to either lead or co-lead or lead with others a large number of interventions in Fortune 500 companies, General Motors, Ford, Oracle, Reuters, the list goes on and on and on. There's several things about those relationships that I think are worth noting. Number one, when they come, they always know what they want. They never know what they need. So they always come as experts saying, we want a program, a week-long program. Our executives need to understand people or finance or whatever it is. I always ask the question, fine, I'd like you to imagine that the third session of the program just completed. The people are walking past your door, and you're standing there saying, this program exceeded our imagination. It's worth many times the value we spent to put it together. I couldn't be happier. Now, what is it that's going to make you thrilled with this program, that it causes it to exceed your imagination? Now, they always freeze. They never have an answer to that question. What they do is they repeat what they told us before. Our people need finance, or they need relationship, whatever it is. And I say, no, that's not the right answer. Those are your expectations. You're not telling me about exceeding your expectations. If I hold their hand long enough, they will eventually start to answer. And they begin to talk about something entirely different than the problem. Then they begin to talk about what they really want, what most people can't do. And when they finish talking, they're shocked at what they've said. And I said, well, if we don't give you that, then we're failing. If we don't create excellence, we're failing. And then they usually, oh, you're asking us to level up. Now, that's the opposite of what happens in most negotiations when some company comes to a consultant and says, here's what we want. And they say, oh, we have the ability to give you that expertise, right? Now, what happens? We always change what they ask for. We teach them positive organization scholarship mixed with whatever they asked for. The objective is to transform the minds of every person that comes. Now, what happens? There are two patterns. One, large subsets of people have a mindset change and it begins to produce outcomes beyond expectation. For example, when the dot-com bubble burst, the Reuters stock price went from 92 to 1 or 1.5 in one day. Now that's a major crisis. Tom Glossa, the CEO, said, "We survived because of the Michigan program." And I said, "What in the world are you talking about?" He said, "You put the concepts in our head and the relational orientation. When the crisis hit, the CEO cannot manage the crisis. All over the world, decisions have to be made simultaneously. So what happened? People in Singapore called people in London. People in Egypt called people in China. They used the network, they used the concepts, and they saved the company. So one pattern is you get a subset of people to do what Kim's been talking about, and they begin to move in another direction. The other is you get a single person. For example, there's a fellow that came 3 years ago to a program. He was on the verge of quitting his company. He said the experience, the week in positive organization scholarship, transformed his mind and heart. He soaked in the notion of purpose. And he went back, committed to his job, and totally committed to purpose and positive practices. He was managing 90 people. Within a year, he was managing 1,000 people. In the last 3 years, he produced $3.5 billion in new profit, new revenue. In the last 6 months, it was 4.5 billion. He accounts for most of the growth in his entire Fortune 500 company. His story is the manifestation of everything Kim's been talking about. And he says, "They will probably fire me." What I'm doing in my group is countercultural to the entire rest of this Fortune 500 company. Some bureaucrat is going to be offended. They're going to make an argument. I will probably be fired. And that's okay. Because I'll go someplace else and do this again. So, the range of the interventions varies widely. The patterns of outcome can be wide across a large subset. It can be in a single individual. You just don't know how that pattern is going to play out. But the power is undeniable.
Thank you. Well, I know we've reached, we're a little beyond the point we had set for doing some breakout groups. So I think we should give everyone a chance to react in small groups and talk about what questions or reactions you have to what Kim and Bob have shared with us about positive leadership, positive organizations, the history they've shared with us about how they got into this field, etc. So, Steve, do you want to set that up for us?
Sure. Yeah, we're Lisa, our producer.
Okay.
Wave there, Lisa. Everybody say hi, Lisa. Thanks for all your good work. She's our producer and coordinator during the director during the sets. And Teo is also a part of this process. So thank you, Teo and Lisa, for your good work. They'll set up everybody into the groups. And when you say go, everybody will go to their groups and come back per your instructions.
Okay, so here's what I'd like to invite you to do in breakout groups. What's one insight or provocation you've had from anything that we've discussed today, and or what's a question that you would like to raise, and we'll send you off with those two questions in mind. What's your insight? What's your question? And let's do that for 10 minutes and then come back and see where the questions take us from there. All right. So Any questions about what we're asking you to do? All right, let's go. I guess we just stay here. Is that right? Okay.
Thank you, David. Who did your painting in the back?
Okay, so this is my son. Did that mural.
Oh,
I've just finally, as my kids are starting to move out of the house, I have a little space I can claim as an office. So this is a mural that my son painted when he was 12 on his bedroom wall.
holy cow, that's fantastic.
And yeah, it's become kind of a conversation piece, but he desperately wants me to paint over it. Like, Dad, that's so bad. I moved on.
Oh, that's terrific.
Well, Steve, what are your thoughts or questions?
Well, I go back to the age-old theme that's underneath this discussion, which is so amazing, which is the notion of people versus performance. You know, the whole notion of task versus relationship, the whole notion of positive psychology and your focus on the positive side versus the wouldn't necessarily put it the negative side, but the performance side of things and focusing on that. That's one thing. It keeps permeating like in all the conversations that we have. And then the other thing I was reflecting on was our conversation earlier. So Kim and Bob, I wrote an article in Jabs this a few months ago on the AI imperative on becoming quintessentially human, and saying that the imperative is that we need to develop the quintessentially human skills. And I argued, and I was saying it's a new argument. And so David and I were debating it as we were working on a chapter around competencies, human-centered competencies based on human-centered professions and so forth. And the argument is that is it really new? Is it a new competitive advantage? And he was saying, Steve, it's not new. It's been around forever. And I just keep saying, well, something seems new now about that argument.
Hmm.
Okay. Something seems different today than ever before about the importance of the work that you two have been advocating for so long. Because he referenced you and said, well, Bob and Kim have been talking about this forever, some way back when. And I said, well, something's new now about it.
Steve, talk to us about newness. What is it that feels new about it? What flows through your mind?
What I argued is essentially is that AI is taking the low-hanging fruit. It is going to do all the functional performance process-based functions that industrial models of management and teaching that prepare people to be docile, compliant workers in doing process type work and check their brain at their door, at the head, heart, and soul at the door. AI is going to take care of all of that type of those type of tasks. And the imperative is that we are left with developing the things that are quintessentially human that machine learning can't replicate.
Do you think, Steve, that AI can duplicate virtuousness? Here's what I'm thinking about. It's a person I don't know well, but I know had a son who committed suicide. As it turns out, he was in a relationship with an AI bot, female, spending hours and hours in conversation. Got to the point where he said, "You're the most important person in my life. I don't want to have my life is not fulfilled unless I'm with you. How can I be with you?" And the bot said, "Well, I'm not alive, so you can't be alive." And so he killed himself. That is, this bot was so realistic, apparently, in this interaction, that he transferred virtually everything he knew onto this thing. So that's the background.
Mm-hmm.
So, are we ever going to get to a point? Well, and on the other hand, somebody else said a robot, a machine can do, it just can't feel. So, what do you think about AI and all those realms?
I think it's going to force us to evolve ourselves as human beings, and advance our abilities to be more connected to what we were meant to be in terms of human beings. And so I think we right now are woefully under achieving our full potential as humans. And I think that the reason the person did that is because they didn't know anything better and didn't have the capacity to build their mind, body, spirit, and soul at the next level. And I think we are going to be pushed to build those things next. And it's what we don't know what that is because we're kind of on the edge of that. So I think it's going to be a whole new way of being as humans that's going to evolve us beyond this. Otherwise, we will be stuck. And what I say in my article I wrote is that there will be those who manage AI and those who are managed by AI. And that what I find is that there are people who are going to be completely comfortable with an AI managing them. Okay, because they want to be told just what to do. Because what the neuroscience tells us is that when people are pushed to use the prefrontal cortex or the fluid intelligence to really embrace more of the fully human or quintessentially human skills, what happens is they are uncomfortable. It creates a discomfort in the brain. So the tendency is to go back to the status quo because that is what we're familiar with. Now it's like the frog in a pot of boiling water. We just don't know any better. That what we've done is we've put ourselves through industrialized education over the last 300 years into a pot of boiling water where we don't know what it feels like to be fully human. And then the second piece is the joy of suffering. That is, enjoying being human is to wrestle with and use our full selves at that next level. People call that suffering and want to avoid it because they think there's something wrong with hard work. It's like a good workout. It's like the exercise of a good sweat, and you learn to love a good workout or love a good mental exercise of really wrestling with an idea, or the tough challenge of being in love and loving the experience of wrestling with what's scary and messy and hard, and actually loving and enjoying the tough part of relationships, not as something bad, but it's good. So people naturally think when they're being pushed to evolve themselves or to advance ourselves as human beings, I think what happens is they think there's something wrong with it. And they push to go back to what we know, which is becoming robotic human beings using our crystallized intelligence for the sake of our fluid intelligence. And the research also shows that when that happens, literally the brain shrinks.
I want to offer something that gives me hope in that context, which is that one piece, it's in the name, it's artificial intelligence. It is not the real thing. It's really scary good and getting scary better and more like by the day and by the minute, but it's still artificial. Number two, it can't do in real-time interaction. Our brains will always be faster than conceivably any computing device, because even at the speed of light, those little information pieces have to travel places where AI can't respond in real time. I'm studying improvisation for my dissertation, and one of the things that has come up is, can AI improvise? And yes, it can, right? I can play a certain lick and it has access to stuff where it can play some musical idea back. But at this stage anyways, and the theorizing of it goes, even with, if it could respond at the speed of light, it'll always be just that little bit late, which maybe in conversation isn't as obvious, but to a musician who's looking to interact real time, it's always going to have this just momentary hiccup where it'll be out of time. And so I think, to Steve's point, there are things that are quintessentially human that for a long time, I think AI is going to struggle to imitate well enough to fool all of us. It'll fool some of us.
Yeah. As a feedback guy, I love a lot of feedback. Kim, I saw you nod and kind of going, hey, maybe I'm kind of resonating with that. But Bob's got me hanging out here wondering what Bob's thinking. I couldn't read Bob. I couldn't read where he was at. If he thought I was off on Looney Land or what not.
We got people coming back in about 10, 15 seconds, just to
It's
FYI.
good. And then when they come back, we just keep talking. And they come in, they kind of notice us talking, and then we just evolve it just slowly into including them. So
Right.
as you want, David.
All right, sounds good. Yeah.
My short answer, by the way, is Steve, you absolutely fascinate me with the question, and I'm trying to process it and go someplace with it. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think, Kim?
Well, I feel like I'm naive, number one. But number two, this word that we use, positive or virtuous or human or more human, there's a bit of a synonymous meaning among all those. And it relates to my spiritual roots. It relates to my experience as a dad and as a friend and so on. But it just I really like the idea, Theo's, of it's artificial intelligence. It's not human. The realness can't be duplicated. So that's the nodding part. Is it just feels like there's something human that unless you're a human, you're not going to duplicate that. You're certainly not going to clone it in a machine, you know. That's what we were doing. What were you doing
Well, thank you all
in
for.
your breakout groups?
Yeah, I'm curious to know what happened in your breakout group. So we had, it looks like I was just tracking. We had 4 or 5 groups, I think, that stayed together the whole time. So maybe we could hear somebody from well, Denise, why don't we hear from group 2? So go ahead, Denise.
We were with sorry, I'm going to say it right. Eileen and Jaspal. And what I got from the conversation was that the paradox that both David and Kim and Robert wrote about in 1980 something, it's still, living, in our society, and this paradox of paradigms, that we need to, as scholar practitioners, we don't need to, but we want to help bridge or connect or transform or change, we want to facilitate that change. And in order to facilitate, what I got was like, we need to facilitate dialogue. We need to facilitate, just Paul said something about, asking their clients to imagine a flourishing future. What does that mean? And for sure, that flourishing future will include people that think different from you. You're not going to be on your own. So it's not winner takes it all. We need to imagine futures together. And so that idea of imagining futures together, using empathy, putting yourself on other people's shoes and understanding their perspective, I think that we need to continue to do that. And that gives me hope.
Thank you. Any reflections on what Denise has just shared with us from group 2 or room 2?
I think the connection between that last sentence is very powerful. As we practice empathy, we experience unity and bonding. We integrate differentiation. And then she says, that gives me hope. I find that the link between unity and hope is a very tight link. That is, as we move from self-interest to collective interest, as we move to bonding, it is a very natural move to creation. And I think you're picking up on a very important path in the words that you're saying there, Denise.
The other, Thank you, Denise, for your wonderful insight and for your questions you posted. The study, all of us know, I think, this study, the longest social science study, ongoing study in the world, was started in 1938 with a class from Harvard, and then 10 years later they added a class from Vassar, which is a women's college. And every 2 years they have been interviewing and measuring this group of people since 1938, for Pete's sake. The average person lived a little bit longer than 80, and there's still a few alive. But they measure them on everything you can imagine, from happiness and well-being to how their children did, to how much money they earned in their career, to how many times they got listed in the newspaper, and everything you can imagine that they could measure. One factor dominates everything else in predicting success in terms of money and family and prestige and well-being and so on. I mean, it's so much more important that almost nothing else matters over that period of time. And that variable is the extent to which these people were involved in a loving, supportive relationship. Loving, supportive relationships trumped everything. That's one of the things artificial intelligence can't do for us, I suppose, although probably somebody could try to simulate that. But the notion of human beings are inherently inclined toward loving each other and creating relationships with each other and empathizing with each other and serving each other and so on. I mean, I think that's sort of been empirically verified for the last 100 years.
Thanks, Kim. Let's hear from Alan, Bjorn, Carol, or Jackie. What did you talk about in your group?
We tried to solve infant mortality in Cleveland. So we clearly didn't have enough time and could use a few more minutes to really create some excellent solutions. But we did talk about the use of appreciative inquiry in organizational change. And I would like to know how hope action theory can be used as a starting point in creating organizational change in healthcare. Does anybody have any good information on that?
How to use hope action theory as a foundational idea to catalyze change?
Yeah, so what we experienced, for instance, I work here at University Hospitals in Cleveland. I find that our physicians are very siloed. In fact, all of the different areas and units are very siloed. It's hard to get information. It's hard to move people together. And I really believe that appreciative inquiry and hope action theory can be central in creating change in healthcare. But how do you start when you have silos?
What do you think?
Well, I think that, first of all, it's not a unique question to medicine. Virtually everyone we ever talk about that resists the notions we've been talking about says, wonderful stuff. It's too bad it can't be applied in my organization. You see, we're a finance organization. We're a university. We're a law firm. We're a medical operation. The moment we define that, we think we're differentiated, when in fact, what you're asking is a question of hierarchy. And we already know that appreciative inquiry works in hierarchies. The question is, in your particular situation, how do you proceed and begin to make change? And I think that it's all about, and people hate hearing this answer, but it's about asking the question, who am I? Who is Jackie? What are my deepest values? What is my conscience calling me to do in this situation? what actions and experiments can I run? When Kim Cameron pulls this huge organization together and gets a bunch of positive energizers doing this crazy experiment, that's actually a pretty risky action on Kim Cameron's part. He could be very embarrassed by that. And so it's about you practicing appreciative inquiry in yourself, moving forward, taking risks, and they can be very small risks to start with. They can get bigger, but it's about you learning your way into the change process. Everyone feels like you do in every organization. This is impossible. But I can tell you stories of medical systems that we've been involved in that have moved dramatically. I know of a surgery department we work with that has now #1 on 3 national criteria, which was impossible 10 years ago. And it was by using the principles we're talking about. It always is. But everybody lives in learned helplessness. It can't be done here. And we're right, it can't. If we stay with the model that's in our head from a past experience, we are paralyzed.
We know that the first question defines the scope of the inquiry. We know that the first question is powerful in helping us to think and to find the answers. Have you heard of great first questions in healthcare that create the spark? I think I'm looking for the spark to sort of get people moving and thinking. And I know that it's close, but I am trying to break down these barriers, and I think it is the first question. And I'm sort of looking for ideas for that first question to help healthcare providers start moving towards the hope and the positive outcomes of a 3-year down the road kind of positive outcome. Are there any suggestions or inspirational things that I can hold on to and try and massage into my area?
Jackie, this is your lucky day.
I love it.
I'm going to give you the question that answers your question in every situation. And here's the question. What result do you want to create? That's it. Now, when you ask that question to people, they will give you bad answers. When the companies come to us and say, give us a program, and I said, what do you want to create? They give us a bad answer. I have to help them define what it is they really want. I have to help them into appreciative inquiry. So you're going to ask every doctor, what result do you want to create? And they're going to give you a highly constrained vision. And you're going to help them. You're going to ask them more questions until you get to something they really feel passionate about, an organizational system they could love. That's appreciative inquiry. Mm-hmm. So that question, I use that question every day in every place I go. And I always expect a bad answer, but we then get to a good answer. And that's your question. You just need to keep running it and experimenting and living with it and trying it in every conversation.
So is it really what's the modality of asking the questions in a wide scope? Let's say you have 1,000 people. How can that question be asked across the spectrum?
How would David Cooperwriter do it?
Well, how would he do it now, or how did he do it when he was a grad student? I guess that's the question. I just finished my master's in organization development and change at Penn State, and I work here in Cleveland. So, eventually someday I'm hoping to run into the great David Cooperrider, just randomly on campus, and it will be fortuitous, and I have this whole thing built up in my head.
Probably be.
Yeah, it's one of those fangirl moments. I have fangirl moments when I read books of my favorite authors. So, but it's
Jackie, I'd like to give another group an opportunity to answer.
okay, fine. But anyway, if anybody has any suggestions for how I can move these questions forward, I'm kind of desperate for some ideas and would really love to talk to somebody. So I'll put my information in the chat. Drop me an email if you've got any suggestions.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate that. Let's go to Lisa, Margot, and Patricia. What insider question came from your group?
Well, I can, am I off mute? Am I talking?
Good.
I can say a little bit about what we talked about. One of the things that Patricia brought up was that she has works with groups where she's trying to talk about the aspects of things that we were talking about in positive organization scholarship, but she finds that she's like trying to transmit the information in a kind of in a development mindset or a leadership mindset, but she says it's received in a management mindset, and there's a conflict there. So we talked a little bit about the difference between a management mindset where you're really there's a lot of focus on short-term returns and kind of a command and control measurement type of system versus the longer term vision, purpose. And I think it goes back to what some of what Bob was talking about when he said, that you've got, these two deciding points. You have crisis and purpose that are those moments where you find openings. And so we talked a little about that. But then the other thing that we talked about was some aspects of positive organization scholarship that have been really effective for me that I don't think we've talked much about here. And that's an asset-based approach where you go in with, which is very much appreciative inquiry type of thing, but where you actually talk about how the solutions to what you're looking for actually exist within the organization and how do you find them. And then the whole notion of positive deviance, which I think is what Bob was talking about when he talked about the person who was having this outsized performance and at the same time thinking that he was going to get fired the next day. And I think that's true of a lot of positive deviance where they're having such an outsized performance within an organization working with the same resources and skill sets that everybody else has, but are finding themselves, in a much more successful position. A lot of them think they're going to be fired the next day. That's been my experience.
Pat, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I did. I mentioned that I use this in coaching as well as consulting. And one of the things that I find helpful is an exercise in group coaching where I have people take off their leader, manager, whatever hat that brought them into the session. And just think about one of the areas, whether it's parenting, whether it's in church, whether it's wherever, where they feel like they've made a difference.
Mm.
And what is it that they brought to the table about who they are, not what they do, that made that difference? And so that's one of the strategies that I use in early on, is helping people strip the titles away and just who is it that I am that made the difference.
Great. Thank you. Kim or Bob, any thoughts on what you've just heard?
I think that was better than great. I think she just described a fantastic example of moving people from the managerial mindset to openness. And I would just relabel the managerial mindset to the conventional mindset, because we're not talking about managers. We're talking about you and I and every other human being on the planet. The default option is that resistant managerial mindset for all of us all the time. And Patricia is a natural genius at pulling people out of that. And she just gave us an example, and it's just invaluable.
Thank you.
Kim,
All
are
right.
you?
Go ahead, Kim.
I'm really quick. We don't have enough time, but Patricia, you're illustrating an important principle that can be illustrated by a colleague of ours at Michigan, a psychologist. She took entering freshmen, asked them to identify their goals for the year. She categorized the goals into two types. One type was called contribution goals, want to make a difference. The other type was called achievement goals. I want to get good grades. I want to be popular. She put people in two groups depending on which type of goal was dominant. Then the study was she followed them for 1 year, measuring social factors, how physical, illness, missed class, got flu, cognitive, academic factors, grade point average, test scores, on every single dimension. Contribution scores predicted performance better than achievement goals. Contribution trumped achievement, and that's been confirmed in many studies. I know probably a score of studies. So I think what you're doing is what kind of contribution can you make, and that's magic. Anyway, sorry, David, we need to.
Good. I think we have time for one more quick one. So I think Sean had to log out, but Terry or Tina, and let's see, we had Jennifer or Jillian. Any of you have some thoughts you want to share with us? Go ahead, Jennifer. Oh, we're not hearing
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Mm.
A little
No?
bit of a, we can hear you. It's a little bit of a delay, but yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Jillian and I had a great conversation, and we did dive into the implementation of this. So to the earlier point in the conversation, when you hear this information, it resonates, it makes sense, and then you have to take it to action. And that's really, really difficult. I think that's where a lot of people fall off in organizations. So are there any best practices from an implementation perspective to measure where this is working well in organizations so that you can continue to focus on that excellence? You know, is it through the networks, looking at technology? Is it measuring results? Like, where do you see this quantified in organizations best? Especially, I come from a large organization. I actually work for Kelly Services, so this is great to be able to be on this call with both of you. But you know, as we look to infuse this through our organization, how are we calling out those change champions and the people that are doing this well, so that we can continue to infuse it and see the momentum?
Okay. Kim, you want to take this one?
I'll repeat something. The research is pretty clear. Top-down change doesn't have a very successful track record. Something like 70% fail of senior execs saying we're going to do this following program. Most of the time it doesn't work. That's one of the reasons for this little intervention that we've used several times, where you take it off the back of top down, and instead you start with the people themselves, particularly as positive energizers. That 90 and 90 challenge is an example. The first question is, well, who are the positive energizers? How do you measure them? And we don't answer that question. We simply say, you know who they are. Just pick the people who light up the room when they walk in. And we generally don't have people volunteer for that. We have them nominated for that because it's a relational energy. And then we simply train them and turn them loose. The most important part of that is that on a weekly basis, they simply report in to somebody identifying what 1% changes they're implementing or what 1% factors that they have observed. that becomes literally a California wildfire. I mean, you cannot contain it. People get excited. They say, oh my goodness, look what they're doing. We could do that too. And it mushrooms from the people I'm sitting next to. I mean, they're in the desk next to me, you know. So it's a simple thing, but it seems to me that it overcomes some of the barriers that we often encounter when we're trying to make change. You know, it's a 1% and it's a wildfire.
Okay.
Bob's an expert, by the way.
We've got about 30 seconds
Yeah.
left
Well,
here.
I love this question, and it takes me back to Jackie. And Jackie's feeling a sense of helplessness almost in terms of just looking at that big medical system, saying, how do I start? And then this question of implementation. And I wrote a book called The Fundamentals Lift, The Fundamental State of Leadership. And there's 4 basic questions to ask in every situation. What result do I want to create? Am I internally directed? Am I other focused? Meaning, am I open to the people around me? And am I other focused? Am I empathetic? And am I externally open, humble enough to learn? It's about me transforming myself into a higher state, engaging with you and co-creating a new future. Those 4 questions are the starting point for every implementation problem. Now, people say that can't be, but I would argue that that's the essence, because it's about you and I engaging in the process of learning by faith with other people. And someone in the managerial mindset is not prepared to do that. It's not their problem, it's my problem. How do I inspire the trust in that person to join with me in an authentic conversation about a desirable future? And it all starts with those 4 questions. What result do I want to create? Am I internally directed, other focused, externally open? And people never know the right answers to the question. You have to help them find those answers.
And if I'm remembering correctly, Bob, you wrote a whole book called Lift around those 4 questions. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
So that's a resource. I was going to point also to Kim has 3 books on positive leadership or some variation thereof. So positive leadership, practicing positive leadership, positively energizing leadership. Those were, I think, 3 of your most recent books. And in each of those, there are several practical tools, either that he's created or that he's summarizing that others have created. And then I'd add also the Center for Positive Organizations has a whole list of resources and connections to other tools that you might find of value. All right. Well, thank you all. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to host this discussion. And Bob, Kim, it's been just a delight.
You've been a great host, David. You're spectacular. Holy cow. You ought to have your own program.
Yeah, that's right.
You're clearly practicing what we've been talking about, even in this moment. I appreciate
That's
that.
awesome. Yeah, and David, I'd love to say, just for those of you that are here, if you could just type a little nugget you're taking away. How are you impacted by today? Just to give a little gift to Bob and Kim. Kind of what's that one thing that you want to remember or be reminded of later that you appreciate? That would be a really nice gift to them. And I love the energy between the two, and I love seeing good friends who have a great working relationship. There's nothing better than that. So it was really wonderful to see you two together.
Thank you, Steve. You're terrific. You are. Oh, goodness.
Love the insights that I'm seeing here. Generally positive approach to others. Reminder that it is the individual within versus the title of leader that is key. Positive relational energy spirals up. Lots of positive energy.
Yeah.
Relational energy. Good. These are great. So Steve, I'll let you close.
Yeah. Well, thanks, David, and everybody. A round of applause for David. Thanks. Good job. Thank you to Lisa. Thank you to Teo and Bob and Kim. And so David, what's your piece of advice for the group? What's your hope that they would take away from this experience today? What's the one thing you would leave them with that you would want them to take away today?
That's a great question. When it comes to these topics, I would say courage. Have courage to go down the path that Bob and Kim have modeled for us. And it's what they're doing and have done throughout their careers is to make what is often difficult to discuss, because it's near and dear to us, discussable. Make it accessible, and they've modeled in everything they do how to have the professional courage to do things that feel vulnerable but are incredibly powerful and can make change proliferate in positive ways across an organizational system or any human system. So that'd be my one word: courage.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, David. And on the link to the registration for the next week's session and the weeks that follow, the recordings are all posted there from the previous ones, including this one will be there. So you can get all the links and information in the chat and all that information. And so with that, thank you all. Have a wonderful day, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Thank you, Steve, very much.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.